In this video, I am going to share with you a step-by-step pattern for making this pumpkin inspired beanie for just 1 to 6 months size. So let's get started. Hey guys, welcome to DIY Crafts. For this I am using 4-ply medium weight acrylic yarn and 4.5 mm crochet hook. However, you can use your favorite yarn along with its suitable hook size. Now begin with a magic ring. And now let's start making the first row. Begin with chain 2. Now in every row, this chain 2 is ignored as a stitch, so we are not counting that as any stitch. It's just a dummy stitch which we use to bring the height. So this is your first double crochet. Now to mark the first stitch, I am using a stitch marker and put that stitch marker onto the top of the first stitch as shown in the video. So this is where we have to make the slip stitch after completing the row. So that's the second double crochet. This is the third one. Now the fourth DC. And here, as I'm making it for a 6 months baby size, I'm just taking 10 double crochet stitches into the center. So it depending upon your yarn thickness and also the requirement of yours, you can change the count. You can take 11, 12, 13 or 14 depending upon your requirement. So here I'm making the last couple of DCs into the center. So after completing the last DC, check for the count. So that's 10 DCs into the center. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10. Now close the magic ring. You can pull the starting tail end tightly. Now remove the stitch marker. Identify the stitch from which you are removing the stitch marker. Now put your needle onto that stitch and then make a slip stitch to close the first row. So this completes the first row with 10 double crochet stitches. As we have ignored the chain 2, we don't have to count that stitch. Now let's start making the second row. Begin with again another chain 2. Again we are going to ignore that chain 2. Now into the same stitch, that's the first stitch, make 1 DC. So here it's only 1 DC as we have ignored the chain 2. Now in the next stitch we are going to make a front post DC. So begin with yarn over, insert the needle in such a way that the double crochet stitch will sit on the top of a needle like this. So put it on the top and bring it to the front. And then perform a double crochet as usual. So that's a front post double crochet stitch. And now we are going to repeat this pattern for 10 times. So this is 1 DC and then again one more front post DC. So insert the needle from the front and bring it to the front again so that the DC will sit on the needle and make a DC. And now this is the third repetition. That's 1 DC and then in the next stitch we are doing a front post DC. So that's a front post double crochet. That's the third repetition, and likewise repeat the same pattern throughout the row until you reach the starting point. Here I am making the last front post DC and this completes the second row with 20 DCs. 10 will be the normal DCs and 10 will be front post DCs. Now remove the stitch marker and on the top of the first DC make a slip stitch, and this completes the second row. Now let's start making the third row. Begin with chain 2 and in the first stitch make a DC increase. So that's first DC and into the same stitch make another DC. So that's a DC increase. Now if you wanted to mark a stitch marker, you can put it. If not, you can just ignore and don't forget to make a last slip stitch on the top of the first DC. And the next stitch is the front post DC. That's already done. And we are going to repeat this pattern for 10 times. So this is the second repetition. Increase in the first stitch and then front post DC in the next stitch. Again in the next stitch we have to make another increase and one more front post DC and repeat it throughout the row until you reach the starting point. So here I am making the front post DC in the last stitch and now make a slip stitch on the top of the first DC, and this completes the third row and you will have 30 DCs by the end of this row. Now let's start making the 4th row. Begin with chain 2 and 1 DC in the same stitch. So that's 1 DC, and in the next stitch make 1 increase, that is 2 DCs worked into the same stitch, and in the next stitch make 1 front post DC. So here we have 1 DC followed by 1 DC increase, that is 2 DCs worked into the same stitch, and then in the next stitch we have a front post DC. So front post over a previous front post, and this is the second repetition. Now repeat this throughout the row until you reach the starting point. Here I am making the last repetition, so that's 1 DC and then 1 increase in the next stitch, and you have one more stitch, that's a front post DC over the previous front post DC, and that's it. Make a slip stitch into the top of the first stitch, and this completes the 4th row with 40 double crochet stitches. And this is how the project looks like so far. Now let's start making the 5th row. Begin with chain 2 and 1 DC in the same stitch. So that's 1 DC. Next make 1 more DC in the next stitch, so that's the second DC. Now in the next stitch make a DC increase, that is 2 DCs worked into the same stitch. Now in the next stitch make a front post DC over the previous front post DC. And this is the pattern which we have to repeat for the 5th row. So 2 DCs, 1 increase and 1 front post DC. So let us begin. This is 1 DC. In the next stitch make 1 more DC, so that's the second DC. In the next stitch make 1 increase, that is 2 DCs worked into the same stitch, and in the next stitch make 1 front post DC. That's the second repetition, and now repeat it throughout the row until you reach the starting point. So here I am making the last front post DC over the previous front post DC, and now slip stitch onto the top of the first DC, and this completes the 5th row with 50 double crochet stitches. And from here on we have to check the crown width at every regular point. So as it is for the 6 month size, 4.5 to 5 inches measurement of crown width is good enough. So I am just stopping the increasing rows and just adding the height of the project. If you are making a bigger size, make sure you had enough crown width by adding few more increased rows before you start adding the height rows. So now from row 6 to row 11, begin with chain 2, make 4 DCs, so that's the 4th DC, and in the next stitch make a front post DC. So we are just adding the height, so the count will remain the same like the 50 stitches over 50 stitches. It's just that DCs over DCs and a front post DC over a previous front post DC. So here the pattern will be like 4 DCs and 1 front post DC, and this pattern will be continued throughout the row from row 6 till the row 11 or until you have the required height. So after completing 11 rows, this is how the beanie turned out. Now for the border part, I'm just making a ribbed border by using a front post and a back post. So further begin with chain 2, and for the first stitch I am using a back post DC. So insert the needle from the back side of a DC, drop a loop and make a DC. And then the next stitch, it's a front post DC, so insert the needle from the top and then make a DC. Again a back post, so needle from the back side and then a DC. Again a front post, needle from the front and then a DC, and alternate it throughout the row, and we have to do it throughout the row. So we have 1 front post and 1 back post, so we'll have a total of 25 repetitions to match the count of 50 stitches. So even though you are making a back post over the front post DC, that's absolutely normal. Just continue to make 1 front post and 1 back post, and we are going to repeat the same pattern for row 13 as well. So 2 rows will give you a nice ribbed border for the beanie. And here I am making the last front post DC of the 13th row, and with this we have completed the beanie part. So make a slip stitch onto the top of the first stitch, and here From row 6 till the row 13 we will have 50 stitches in each row. So make chain 1 and then trim the excess thread by leaving a small tail end, like 3 to 4 inches tail end to weave in is good enough. Now once the stitching part is completed, take the tapestry needle and we are going to weave in this tail end into the project. So with the help of a tapestry needle, weave the tail end across few stitches and then trim the excess thread close to the project. And now let's add the stem part for the beanie, like to resemble the pumpkin shape. So for that I am using a brown color yarn and along with the same hook, the 4.5 mm hook. So begin with a slip knot and then make chain according to your requirement. Here I am just making chain 10. This will give you the height of the tail. So if you wanted a longer tail, you just make a longer chain. If you wanted a smaller tail, you can make it a smaller tail. So chain 10 and 2 more chains extra for the height chain. So that's like a total of chain 12. And now from the hook, leave 3 chains and then into the next chain, yarn over, insert the hook, drop a loop and make a half double stitch. And now continue to make half double crochet stitches in each and every chain throughout the row. I'm using half double crochet stitches, which is easier to work with, and also it will give you a nice wider stem look. But if you want, you can use I-cord or you can change the stitch to slip stitch or a double crochet stitch, or depending upon your interest. So once all the half double stitches are done, chain 1 and then trim the excess thread. You can just leave a 3 to 4 inch of tail end. So this completes the stem part. Now let's attach this stem onto the top of the hat. So before that I'm just joining the tail ends by making a simple knots with against each other, so that it will just have one single center point for the stem. And now I'm just taking the help of a crochet hook to insert the tail ends onto the center part of the cap. And now using the starting tail end of the cap, I'm securing the stem. And now insert the tail ends into the nearby stitches and then trim the excess threads close to the project. And that is how you will do the finishings of the beanie. Once all the finishings are completed, your pumpkin inspired beanie is now completed. I hope you all enjoyed watching this tutorial. Do give this pattern a try and let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. The written pattern for this project is given in the description. Do check it out. See you all in the next video. Thank you for watching. Please like the video, share it and subscribe to DIY Crafts.